What is up, guys? Hope you're doing well. This is my second video in my free-to-play build series. Today I've got a core Necromancer condition build that is totally free-to-play and works really well in PvP. I've been playing Guild Wars 2 ever since it came out on and off, and I'm super excited to welcome all of the new Steam players. Whether you are free-to-play or you've bought all the expansions already, I'm here to try and help out and show you some of the free-to-play builds that we all kind of quote-unquote grew up on in the early days of Guild Wars that are still viable today if you're a free-to-play player. So let's get into this build. This is a condition build, which means you are not doing most of your damage with the actual hits that you do to the target. You're doing damage with conditions, so things like bleeding and poison, but you're also generally weakening the target with all kinds of other conditions, so cripple, torment, blindness, weakness, chill. So for the build, you're going to take the Carrion Amulet, which gives you power, but most importantly condition damage, and vitality to boost your health pool, since the Necromancer is pretty squishy, so having more health is just generally a good thing. Rune of Ore is a pretty good rune. It increases your condition damage, which is very important, but it also decreases the condition damage that you take and also increases your health pool as well. That's really good for being able to handle having more conditions on you. Some of these parts of this build rely on siphoning conditions from your teammates onto yourself and then you being able to cleanse them. Gives you a little more of a buffer of time to have a chance to actually cleanse the conditions or transfer them to the target. Then your weapons that you're going to use are Scepter, Dagger, and Staff. Staff is your typical utility weapon for Necromancer, so most builds with Necromancer are going to use Staff, but Scepter and Dagger is going to be your main damage dealing weapon set. On the weapon sets, you're going to use Revocation and Sigil of Doom on your Scepter Dagger. Revocation will remove a boon. Some boon rip on this build is really nice. Sigil of Doom gives you a little bit more poison stacking. On your staff, you're going to run Sigil of Energy, which gives you more dodge. And then you're also going to run Sigil of Intelligence. This was in the build, and I was a little skeptical about it at first, but what I realized is with this trait, Barb's Precision, critical hits have a chance to cause bleeding, and it also increases bleeding duration. So when you swap to Staff and you place down your marks, each one of these marks will also apply bleeding, or at least the first 3 that you place. So that's just more condition stacking, which is pretty nice. So I'll kind of keep it to the most important traits. So the first important trait is Plague Sending, and this is one where when you enter Shroud, which we'll talk about Shroud a little bit later, when you enter Shroud, your first attack transfers conditions. So if you have conditions on yourself, you go into Shroud and then you just hit them with an auto, that'll transfer some conditions. Quickening Thirst increases movement speed above the health threshold, so this helps out in the beginning of the match when you're running to the first node. Vampiric, siphon health whenever you hit a foe, that's really nice. Unholy Martyr, this is an important one and one I kind of explained a little bit already. Entering Shroud transfers conditions from allies to you. Exiting Shroud consumes conditions currently on you and converts them to life force. So entering Shroud transfers some of the conditions from your teammates onto you, up to 5. And then when you exit Shroud, if those conditions are still on you, then you'll just get life force and they'll go away. So it's really good for helping the team out with dealing with conditions. Soul Marks. Marks become unblockable. That is really nice. One of my favorite ways to use Reaper's Mark, which gives Fear, which I'll show you Fear. This is Fear. He is turned around, and if he was a player, he would be walking away and not able to use any skills. One of my favorite ways to use that is to use it right before someone finishes a stomp on a teammate. So if this is unblockable, that is very important to be able to use your Reaper's Mark specifically, but also your Putrid Mark, because that one is important for transferring conditions. Really good trait to have. Another good one to know about is Doomfire. Shroud skill 1 inflicts burning on your target. Burning is the highest short duration damage condition out of burning, poison, and bleeding. So when you use Shroud 1, you give the target burning, which is really nice for doing a lot of damage really quickly. So moving on to your skill bar, I'll be honest, your weapon skills are not very important as far as the order that you use them in. You're not really trying to get a huge burst combo on, you're just trying to stack on the conditions over time. But some decent ones to start off with. Feast of Corruption, your Scepter 3 skill. It will convert boons on your target to conditions, so that's a really good boon rip to start a fight off with, because most people will buff up before the start of a fight. So if you take some of their boons off, that gives you an edge in like right at the beginning of the fight. However, it'll also give them torment for each condition on them, so it might be good to stack on a few conditions first and then use this one. Usually I'll use Scepter 2 or Dagger 5. Those both give bleeding, as well as Scepter 2 gives cripple, so that'll help you close in on them. Deathly Swarm, your Dagger 4. Unleash a swarm of insects to blind and transfer conditions to your enemies. That's an important one to have off of cooldown to be able to use whenever you get a really big condition stack, and you just need to find a target and use this on them. On your staff, it's important to know that all of your skills, including staff 1, give you life force, which it allows you to go into Shroud more often. So if nothing else, spamming staff 1 is a good way to set yourself up for another burst or a Shroud burst. Your really important marks on your staff are obviously Reaper's Mark, which is staff 5, which I talked about earlier. Staff 4, which again transfers conditions, very important for you to have access to. Staff 3 is another good one because it gives chilled. So targets that are running away, I tend to use staff 3 on. So for your utility skills, Consume Conditions is your heal skill. Feast on your conditions, gaining health for each one consumed, but then you get vulnerability. Spectral Walk is a really good skill for Necromancer because we really lack mobility and stun breaks. So this is your stun break. It's also really good because the way that it works is you pop the stun break, and then when you use it again, you go back to wherever you first popped it. So really nice to use when you think you might get into some trouble, but also just to be deceptive to your enemy. Although it's probably better to use Spectral Walk a little more proactively because as you have Spectral Walk on, you continually consume conditions every 2 seconds. So going into a fight with Spectral Walk on is pretty nice. Just know that you only have a certain amount of time before you're not able to return to the original spot anymore, and the skill goes on cooldown. Next one is another mobility skill for Necromancers. This is Summon Fleshworm. What you do is you cast a Fleshworm wherever you want to place it. This doesn't really matter, but your Fleshworm will like attack people and do damage to them, but like that's not why we use it. The reason we use it is because of Necrotic Traversal. So whenever you use Necrotic Traversal, you will teleport to where your Fleshworm is. Now it's not perfect, you can't go like across the map and teleport exactly to where your Fleshworm is, but that gives you another chance to be deceptive, just like Spectral Walk, and have another stun break, most importantly. It's really good to use both of these in tandem to try and make sure you have the most amount of mobility and stun break in order to be really deceptive and difficult to hit, because you really don't have many defenses as a Necromancer. The biggest reason people love using Fleshworm, especially the more advanced players, is that it allows you to do kind of more advanced movement techniques. You can place your Fleshworm in places that are difficult for other players to get to. So for example, say I'm fighting down here and I need to get away. I can use my Fleshworm up there and then teleport to it, and all of a sudden I am quite a bit further away from the enemy, and I also have high ground now, so I can be, you know, having the advantage here. Your other utility skill, this one is the one that actually Fleshworm can potentially be optional if all of that I just described is not appealing to you, but this one can also be optional. This is Spectral Ring. Create a spectral ring that protects allies and inflicts fear on foes. Gain life force if you inflict fear on foes. So that's really nice. Fear is really nice to have on a defensive skill. And then finally, you're gonna run Lich form. This is your elite skill. Assume the form of a Lich for a brief time, improving your precision and vitality. Gain life force when this skill ends. You also, so you get stability. Let's talk about your Death Shroud. So obviously there's this life force bar that you need to fill to be able to enter Death Shroud, and then as you enter Death Shroud, it will continuously tick down. You do gain life force from nearby deaths, although deaths don't occur very often in PvP compared to in PvE. So you're gonna have to rely on some of your skills to really build your life force. So you'll see life force percent and life force per condition. And once you get in, you have Doomfire, so that's just an attack, but because of your traits, it also gives burning. So this gives chilled. This is a fear. This siphons a whole bunch of life force, so that'll keep you in Shroud for longer. And then this sends out a binding chain that causes torment and can immobilize, and it'll also pulse out conditions. Alright, so let's get into some gameplay with this build. You're definitely a DPS in this build, so you can't really do anything unless you're with your team or at least a support, so you're going to have to definitely stick with your team. So in this game, I'm going to go straight to mid and try and help my team win the fight at mid. Although we are only bringing 3 to mid, I noticed the ranger is splitting off to far. So that's not very normal. So I'm gonna hang tight. I got a little bit ahead of my team, so I'm trying not to get ahead of them by too much and just feed. So I'm gonna kite a little, play a little back, try and poke with my staff since it has max range compared to the other weapons, and then pick out a target. Looks like this guy's going way too deep, so I'm gonna start putting my conditions on him with my scepter skills, and then I'm gonna go right into my shroud and try and get lots of damage out. We already got him down, so we're looking good here in this fight, even though we're probably down 1 player, although now our side noders are rotating in. I'm using my staff to try and peel for myself. I've got one on me who's melee, so I'm going to pop my ult, my elite, and try and get this guy down really, really quick, which I am successful in being able to do so. I'm basically able to kill him fully on my own, as my team is focusing other players. Truthfully, I probably should have come back out of Shroud at this moment. I should have been using other skills so that I don't waste too much life force in between when I wasn't actually on a target, because as you stay in Shroud, your life force just ticks down. So that time when I had to go across the node to get to these other players, I was definitely wasting Shroud. So we pretty much won this fight. We have both the side nodes, so we're looking really good here. As players are trying to escape, I used Staff 3 to put some chill on them, so that's really helpful. And then this is kind of the perfect Shroud combo that I just pulled there on that guy. I'll show it a little later. There's one fight where I actually think I pull off this combo pretty well. So I'll show that to you again a little later. But we're really just... we have control of the map, so we're really just trying to push the spawn, continue to snowball the staggers. My team's kind of pulling back a little here, so I'm going to pull back and help out over here with the ranger. He looks like he's in a 2v1, so I'm going to come help him, although he's already got it down. But just to accelerate the process and let him get control of that node, I'm going to pop Shroud and help him do some damage to this Virtuoso. Even though all of my skills are on cooldown, I continue using Shroud 1 to stack some burning on this player, and it actually helps get them down. They have a little bit of bleed left over, so I'm going to come over and finish this off so that they don't res and take the cap from him or delay his abilities to get the cap. And so I finish him off. He's going to get the cap. I'm going to rotate back over to mid. We did lose some players, and we kind of lost. We lost home node. But now we're going to rotate back over to mid. And this is where, so I focus on this guy while the ranger focuses on another. Start poking a little, and then I pop right into Shroud. So I use Shroud 2, Shroud 3 for some fear, Shroud 5 to put the tether on him, and then Shroud 4 to leech some life source. That's pretty much the perfect Shroud combo, because when you cast Shroud 2 and then also pop the fear while the Shroud 2, it shoots out a projectile. So while that's in the air, you use Shroud 3 to fear them, and it's guaranteed to hit. So that's a really good combo. I'm going to do it again here. Shroud 2, Shroud 3, and then I don't do 5 because it's on cooldown, but I am able to get the 4 off, and then I'm also able to get the 5 off, I think, for the full tether. Yep, because it explodes there, and then he gets immobilized. So we're doing well in this fight. We're going to probably finish this kill off. I pop my elite just to make sure of it, because I'm pretty sure in my internal clock, yep, right there, I was pretty sure more players were going to come off of spawn, so I really needed to get that player down quickly, because they would be right there and jumping on me as soon as they came out of spawn. So I have basically initiated a team fight right outside of their spawn, but that's because I knew we had control of the map and we were looking really good. So basically, I'm just trying to do as much DPS as I can. I'm trying to help out in the team fights, pump out damage. This is a little bit of tech. So the Shroud 1, I'm going to rewind this. Shroud 1 is a projectile. You can see the green balls going out to my target. But if you stand behind someone who's like downed or something, not moving, while you're trying to shoot the balls at someone else, you can basically hit both of them at the same time and get the damage onto both of them, since it does penetrate through single targets. So we're looking really good here. We have full control of the map. We're pushing up on their spawn. We do, since we're doing so well, we do decide to start trying to break down this door and go for their lord. Obviously, this is not a very good game to teach you anything about the mechanics and rotations of the PvP in Guild Wars 2. It was really just to showcase this build and its potential and some of the rotations that you would do. Truthfully, other than the Shroud rotation, there isn't really much that you need to do as far as damage rotations on your weapon skills. So yeah, that's Necro, core, Condi, Necro. Again, you're not focused on doing a lot of strike damage. You're not trying to get really big, high number hits. You are trying to stack conditions on the enemy and whittle them down slowly, and just kind of generally share the love as far as conditions go and help out in the team fights. So if you have any questions about the build, feel free to leave a comment and about the build or how it plays out, or any variations you can think of that you think might work. Feel free to ask in the comments. I'm going to leave a link to the build on metabattle.com. So feel free to check that out so you can read a little more about it and get the build code itself. And hopefully this helps. I love playing Necro, and this is obviously the build that we all started with when we first started playing Necros. Obviously there's now, Reaper is fun. Harbinger is obviously the meta for Necro now, but this is definitely a solid build that can definitely hold its own even in today's meta. So if you like this and it helps you out and you want to see more builds that you can use as a free-to-play player, feel free to subscribe, because this is a series that I'll be working on for the weeks to come. And of course, leave this video a like so that it can get out to other new players who are looking to have some fun builds to play that can also keep up in today's meta. Thank you for watching, and have a good one.